All right. Hi, everybody. So, if you're watching this, you are most likely looking to buy your first home. And let me just start and say that it is a privilege to go ahead and help you with this process potentially. In this, we're just going to look at whether it's right for you to even consider buying your first home if you're ready. And if you are ready, what does that look like? Again, if we haven't met or talked over the phone, my name is Colin. I'm the team leader for the Barr Realty team. I live in New Braunfels with my fiance, soon to be wife, Haley, and our brokerage, RD Realty, is based out of North San Antonio, but her and I cover North San Antonio, really even west, northwest San Antonio, all the way to South Austin. And so, yeah, we're excited to do this. I've been working on this for a while and hope you find it very valuable and helpful. And if you do, would love to potentially set up a call or an in-person or virtual meeting for us to talk about your options further. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it here. All right, so welcome to your first time homebuyer guide. This is a complete course navigating the market with confidence. If you'd like to go to our website, you can do so below. My goal for this course is pretty simple. It's really just to give you enough confidence in what you're going to see here today so that you can make a decision for yourself. I don't want to make a decision for you. I'm going to give you the information to give you the confidence and also lean off of my credibility and experience so that you feel comfortable moving forward or not. And whether if you do move forward, just know that you're in really good hands. All right, so by now you should have already received a buyer introduction packet PDF, whether that's email or whether I texted it to you. If you haven't received this, go back and ask for that. That packet really talks about who we are, why we do business the way we do, our values, some case studies of past clients, and it really gives you an idea. The reason that's important is because you can listen to a video by anybody on the internet. But if you haven't had a conversation with me or my team, or you haven't looked over our buyer intro packet, which contains info on who we are, there's really no trust, credibility, or relationship in place. And so everything I say here will be meaningless, really. So go ahead and go through that first. And once you do, then come back and watch this. For those of you who have already gone through it, let's get into it. So the first topic I want to talk on and really go through is renting versus owning. What is the difference and which is right for me? So let's just do a compare and contrast. Renting. A pro or a benefit of renting is you have more flexibility to move locations if you plan on being in a location for less than 2 years. If you plan on being in a location for more than 2 years, it does make sense to actually just own a home. We'll get into that more later. Another pro of renting is you have lower maintenance costs. So nothing that breaks in your apartment or home, you're going to pay for. Another pro is you have potentially lower monthly costs. This does depend on the home that you go with. More on that later. And you have potentially lower upfront costs and less requirements. Requirements, if you go look at the owning side right here, to buy a home, it's different than renting. You're not going based off of 3 times your monthly income. You're going off of credit, you're going off of work history and debt to income. More on that later. But the shifting of the mindset from renting to owning is a big one. I would say if you're somebody who you see yourself being in a location, general area for at least 2 years, like you have a solid job lined up, you feel good at your job, or if you're 1099, that you feel good at what you do, and you're going to be in that area for at least 2 years, for sure, then I would really consider owning a home versus renting. It just makes more financial sense. And it is okay to rent until you have that security in place. But once you have that security in place, it really makes more financial sense to go ahead and own a home. You will have potentially higher maintenance costs when you own a home. Anything that breaks, if it's not under warranty, then you'll have to have it replaced. However, if you go with some options that I'm going to recommend, then warranty comes with the home purchase. And payments are broken up into principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. You can see that here, and we'll break each of those down later on. So renting versus owning, some questions to ask yourself. So how much money have I spent renting and gotten 0% return on throughout your life? Now, this is a self-reflection exercise. Just ask yourself that. And that question is okay if you haven't had the security of a stable job or a stable location, then that is, pretty much disregard that question. But if you have the stable location and job security, and you have for a while, I would just challenge you, do a calculation. Let's say you've had your job for 2 years and you've been renting. I'm just pulling out my calculator here, as you can see. Let's say you're spending $1,600 a month on rent times 12 months is $19,200 times 2 is $38,400. That's $38,000 that you've pretty much just put towards nothing and gotten a 0% return on. So again, prerequisite is feel secure in your job and location. But if those things check out, you are just burning money at that point and should consider owning a home. Now, if you have spent even a part of that money or time owning a home, how much more wealthy would you be? That's a question that we're going to answer. Part of that $38,000 actually would go towards your net worth. And we're going to answer that in this course. Another question you need to ask yourself, what has held me back from buying a home in the past? Maybe it's the two things that I already went over. Maybe it's some internal conflict. I don't know, but you should reflect on that. And then you should ask yourself, have I overcome these obstacles, or am I even willing to? If you're not willing to overcome those obstacles based off what you'll see here today, then just do me a favor and yourself a favor, and just don't bother looking at homes. That's okay. I would only say reach out to me or my team if you think that you can't overcome your own obstacles, or if you want help in overcoming those obstacles. We are more than glad to help you. But we also have to protect our time as well. All right. So how much home can I afford? This goes beyond the purchase price. So down payment. Now, down payment is an interesting subject because especially for your first home, you're going to look at 0 to really 3.5% down, the majority of people. Now, I have helped other people buy their first home with 20% down to save on costs, but that's a rare minority. Now, so for the 0 to 3.5, there are different programs. And we're going to go through these pretty in depth just so you have enough information. But if you want to do a 0 down, you're going to go through VA. If you're a veteran, you need a DD 214 or 214. And if you're USDA, you need to be in a USDA area. So that's typically outside of city limits. But there's a map that I can show you whenever we have our consultation, and we'll just go through that. Those are government-backed loans, and you need a credit score of 620 or more. A common question I get is if there's two people on the loan, whose credit score do they take? They take the lowest of the two. So if one person has a great credit score and makes enough money for you to qualify, just use that person on the loan. We'll get into the rest later. There are 1% down loan programs. They're special first-time buyer programs. You need a 620 credit score or above. The only con with this is it's not a government really backed loan, and so the interest rates are a little bit higher, which affects your monthly payment. We'll go into some examples. You have the 3.5% down loan, FHA. FHA, you only need a 580 score, but you need 3.5% down payment. However, caveat to this is if you have somebody who can gift you 100% of the down payment or a part of it, then you can also do FHA. You don't have to come up with the money. There's also 3% down payment, which is conventional. Again, a little bit higher rate, not as high as the 1%, up to 20% down conventional. Other costs you need to look at, because they're not only down payment, but there's also closing costs. So closing costs are fees, typically loan origination fees, lender fees, title fees, builder fees, HOA fees, and taxes, etc. Typically ranges about 3% of the sales price. So if you're buying a $300,000 home, you can average it to be about $9,000. However, we can have these covered and you don't have to pay these with certain scenarios that I'm going to walk you through. You also have ongoing costs. So again, we're going to break these down: monthly principal and interest, taxes and insurance, which are all included in your monthly payment. And then you have on top of that maintenance and utility costs that you need to factor into your budget. Now, let's look at some additional upfront costs. And I'm going in depth on this upfront to set, realistic expectations, but then towards the end, I'm going to show you how to kind of not pay these. All right. Additional costs, earnest money. So whenever you go and sign a contract to buy a home, you put down what's called earnest money. And that is essentially a good faith deposit that you're going to see this transaction through. It does go towards your down payment as well. So let's say if your down payment is $7,000, you put down a $2,000 earnest money deposit. Now your down payment, or what you need to bring to the table 30, 20 days later, is just $5,000. Another cost you need to really consider is a home inspection right here. Home inspections typically range between $400 and $700 depending on the size of the home. And they're very, very much worth it, especially if you're going to buy a new construction or builder home. You need to have this inspection done just to make sure you're being protected. It can save you thousands of dollars later on. There's also an appraisal fee, typically between $500 and $700. These are part of the closing costs. However, it is paid up front. Sometimes you can get away with it being paid at the end instead of it up front. Moving costs, depending on if you're local or long distance, you need to budget for that. You need to also budget for initial home repairs or updates, especially if you're buying a pre-owned home. I would say in general, buying a pre-owned home is going to be more expensive because you're going to have maintenance coming up faster. Your AC unit is already older. Your roof is already older. Your water heater is already older. Your grading on your home is already deteriorating. So these are things that you really need to take into consideration. Sometimes people want to go with the pre-owned home, but generally speaking, you need more money to do so. Home warranty, this is optional, but if you do want your appliances and HVAC, which is your AC, to be under warranty, then typically it's $300 to $600 for the first year. So this ranges drastically depending on if you're moving or, a lot of things. Earnest money is the other big one. But we don't have to pay these, not all the time. And here's where we can kind of decide between the two. New versus pre-owned. Now, at the time I'm recording this, it's April of 2025. So things change. Maybe when you're watching this, maybe new homes are not the thing, not the ideal strategy. But as of right now, for your first home, they are. And I'll give you a few reasons why. New homes right now, builders are offering to cover your closing costs for you. So remember that closing costs, $9,000 right here. They're offering to cover that. Most of them are offering to cover all of it. Builders are also offering to give you a low interest rate at 4%, which directly impacts your monthly payment. You'll see more on that later. They can close faster, between 20 and 25 days. Home warranty comes with the purchase, and builders pay my commission for you. So you don't have to worry about my commission. Less upfront money for you. Pre-owned. You can negotiate in pre-owned to cover part or all of your closing costs. I've done this many times. You can ask, I would say out of all the first home I've done, I've gotten about probably 20% of the transactions covered all of their closing costs. And so it is definitely possible. We just need to find a motivated seller to do that. However, with pre-owned, you're going to have a market interest rate. Right now, they're 5 to 6.5, depending on if you're going FHA, USDA, or conventional. So you're going to have a much higher rate. It's going to increase your monthly payment. You can close in 25 to 45 days, depending on the type of loan. Home warranty is bought separately, so it's an additional expense. And the seller does pay for my commission most of the time. Not all the time, but the seller will pay for most of my commission most of the time. All right. Now, I'm going to look at some models with you, really just one in-depth one, and then we'll give some examples of renting versus owning. And so I want you to kind of think about where your money is going and what's the best use of your money. So this is a new home example, and you'll see the reason it's a new home example is because of this interest rate right here is at 4%. So this is based off of a $300,000 home, down payment of 3.5%. This is the probably most case scenario. I'm going to try and find you one with 0, 1, 3, or we can do 3.5. 3.5 is the most common, but 4% interest rate. You would have a mortgage payment of $2,188. However, part of that payment you can write off on your taxes. And so the annual tax savings shown monthly is about $307. And so your adjusted monthly payment is $1,881. Now, don't get this twisted. You're still paying the $2,188 per month. However, come tax time, you're going to get that money refunded back to you if you do your taxes correctly. It's just a way for you to think, right now I'm paying $1,600 a month in rent. $2,188 sounds like a lot, but if I get part of that back on taxes, then it's really only $280 increase. Not only that, but leading into the next point, you actually break even in 2 years in this example. So let's look at some numbers. You do a 3.5% down payment at $300,000. You're bringing $19,564 to the closing table. This is actually, if you go new, a little bit over exaggerated. Let me show you why. 300,000 times 0.035 or 3.5% is 10,500. So if we're going new, again, we're going to cover all the closing costs. Remember that $9,000? There it is. So it's just 10,500 actually. Total payments made, this is over 2 years. Your total payments are 52,535. Simple, pretty simple math. If you just do 2188 times 24, you're going to come out to that number. 24 for 24 months or 2 years. And then maintenance, I mean, yeah, $3,000, sure. I mean, honestly, if we buy a new home, you're not really going to have any maintenance. But sure, we'll include that just for devil's, what is it called? The argument. And then, so you're at 38,160. And then you're also going to then take into consideration appreciation. So in 2 years, your home should appreciate about $21,000 in a normal market. I have to preface with this. 2022 to 2024, home prices were kind of flat. They didn't appreciate much unless you're in a really good neighborhood. And that's because, honestly, we had super low, literally lifetime low interest rates at 2.5%. And then we went all the way up to 7% interest rates. And so that hasn't really, I mean, it's only happened a few times in history. Very rarely does that happen. So if you're in a stable market, which the majority of life is in a stable market, your home will appreciate like that. Principal, this is what you're paying towards your principal. Principal is essentially the money going towards your name. Interest is money that's going towards the banks. And then tax savings. So what you do, you just subtract the two and it comes out to 38,160, and you compare that 38,160 with a $1,600 per month rent for 2 years, and you break even in 2 years. So in just 2 years, if you just bought a home and you went through all these numbers and everything is exactly how I'm showing you here, in 2 years, you would actually break even and not owe any money. You would actually get that money back and be breaking even instead of it going to nothing. You can see again in this example, the down payment was $10,500. Like I showed you, you had some appreciation and you paid some money towards principal, so you have $42,453 in your name and your equity. So when you use that to sell, or not use that, but when you sell the home, you can recapture some of that. Let's say the home appreciates from 300 to 321, as shown in the example. Your loan balance is at 278.9. You pay some prorated, you pay some taxes when you close the home, and you also pay a commission to some realtors and some other closing costs. You would net at close 27,627. Now, that's a little bit high because the closing costs are only 12,000. Really, you should be budgeting for a little bit more, and it just didn't do it in the calculation. But if you're paying a 6% realtor commission plus other closing costs, you should be factoring in about probably 8% in closing costs. So if we do 367 times 8%, that's 25,709. So if we subtract 25.7 from 42.4, it comes out to about 14,753, which is more realistic. Now, if the home appreciates more, then great. Or if when you sell the home, you don't have to pay as much commission, or you don't have to pay as much closing costs because we're in a hot seller's market, then you would net more. Regardless, you gain money when you close. You're getting a return on your investment. That's what I want you to start thinking about. Let's go to the next slide here. Now, here's where it gets fun. I'm going to give you some examples. There we go. Move me out of the way. Now, this is a look right here, a new home USDA example. So like I mentioned with the new homes, lower interest rates. This is where you can actually see how that matters. This is very important. Please pay attention. Loan is at 4% interest rate, right? So this information, the house is priced, you're buying at $300,000 home. Loan is at 4%. You're doing zero down. Remember, USDA is zero down. You're doing zero money out of pocket. You can see it right here. This says bring to close 6613. Those are just closing costs. And if you're going with a new home, like I said, you're not going to pay any closing costs. If you go with a new home with the USDA program, they're going to, USDA is zero down payment and the builders are covering your closing costs. So it's literally zero down. All you would need to do is pay the earnest money deposit, whatever that may be. So loan amount is the full loan amount, and then APR, total loan amount, yada, yada. So you can see the principal and interest payment is $1,446. Homeowner's insurance, this is property insurance, $125. Property taxes, $500. This is a little bit high, but I did an overestimate. You have a government fee or a guaranteed fee, and then you have a HOA fee of $25 a month. If you're not in an HOA, cool, but most people are or will be. $2183.64. Again, that is what you're paying, but with taxes, writing off your taxes, you can bring that down to about $1,880, which is pretty awesome. This is showing you exactly where the 6613 is going to. So these are your closing costs. Closing costs, you typically have upfront 14 months of insurance, upfront 4 months of taxes owed upfront, 15 days of interest if you're closing in the middle of the month, fixed costs, prepaid costs, and those fixed costs and prepaid costs are over here. It actually just breaks out the fixed costs, but the total, the prepaid costs are on a different slide. We can go into that later. So what I'm trying to explain to you essentially is just go new home, go USDA if you don't have any money to bring up front. The builder is going to cover this 6613. And that's going to be your monthly payment at $300,000 at a 4% rate. Now, let's look at a pre-owned versus new. Same loan, USDA. Now, loan went from 4% interest rate to 6% interest rate. Payment went from $21.84 to $25.54. Very high increase. For most people, this is too much of an increase. It's the same loan, it's the same price, $300,000, but your interest rate went from 4 to 6. Payment went up. You can see the principal and interest is the main thing here, going from 1446 to 1887. That's because your interest rate is higher. And then the closing costs are pretty much the same. So this is what I'm trying to explain. If you go pre-owned, which is fine, a lot of people still do want to go pre-owned, then just expect a higher monthly payment. You might have to decrease your home price. Let's look at another one. This one, now we're shifting to FHA, 3.5% down FHA. Now, what are the benefits of FHA again? You can have a 580 credit score instead of a 620, but you need to bring that 3.5% down to closing. But you can have it gifted to you, all of it. So if you know somebody who wants to gift you some money, there you go. Same price, $300,000. You needed $10,500 down payment, 3.5% down. Loan is at 4% rate. Total monthly payment, $2,188. And your closing costs to have down payment plus your total closing costs, which again, if you go new, this $7,000 is erased. And if you go new, you're just paying the $10,500. That's it. Let's look at this new versus pre-owned. If you go pre-owned, then again, you're bringing $18,000, a little bit more, and you're at a 6% interest rate, loan at 6%. Monthly payment goes from $2,189 to $2,549, a lot higher. And in a pre-owned situation, the builder's not going to be covering this because you're not going with the builder. You're going to and negotiating with a seller, person who lives in the home. And they may not want to pay this. Maybe they really do need to move. Then we can negotiate for them to cover these. I've done that, like I said, about 20% of the time with my first-time home buyers. So it is possible. Not always, though. Typically, sometimes with my buyers, they find a home that they really like. It's a very nice home. Other people are interested in it. And the seller in that situation doesn't have to give away this money because they have other people interested in the home. Sometimes they don't have other people interested in the home and they're not in a good negotiating position. And in that case, we would ask for them to cover this. So your only down payment would be $10,500 if we can get it covered with pre-owned. I'm going to give a few more examples, but I hope this is really helping you kind of put things into perspective as far as which direction you should go. Let's look at a pre-owned conventional 1% down. Again, $300,000, 1% down payment is $3,000, but your loan percent is at 7% interest rate. Why is it at 7% interest rate? Because you're doing 1% down on a non-government loan. Now, if we go back up to new USDA, you can get a 4% interest rate. It's a government loan, but you have to have that 620 credit score and other requirements. If you do conventional, you're most likely buying a pre-owned home anyways. Typically, builders don't do this 1% down conventional. It doesn't really make sense for them to do that. Conventional has a little bit less strict lending requirements. So if you're buying an older home that has some structural issues or any kind of other issues, but you still really want the home, you need to go conventional and not a government loan like FHA or USDA. So this is where this could come in handy. However, especially if you're doing 1% down, you're going to eat that cost on your interest rate. It's going to be higher. Right now, it's probably about 7%. Total monthly payment, you can see this is 1% down. So your down payment is $3,000. The closing costs, we can, again, get those covered, hopefully, in a good negotiating situation. So you just need $3,000, hopefully, or up to $9,000, depending on the deal. There's also conventional 3% down. Why would you do this? Well, you get a little bit better rate. So if you have the $9,000 instead of the $3,000 to put down, it's going to really save you on your monthly payment. I mean, look how much this is coming down from $2,834 to $2,600, $9,000 in this situation. And you can see the other costs here. It is an option. So that was a ton of information. And I just didn't really want to cover any other information other than those, renting versus owning and new versus pre-owned, because that majority of what we're going to be talking about are those topics. The rest of the things are more really on a conversation by conversation basis. And for the sake of time, I didn't want to make this video too long, but I hope this helps. So right now, where you should be at is your initial consultation and finances. So we're going to uncover your needs in a buyer consultation. This is not a buyer consultation. This is just a course. But if you find value in this and want to set up a buyer consultation, I recommend doing so. Even if you're 6 months to a year out, it's good to have those conversations way up front, especially if we need to start tackling things like credit and other things like that. So, again, this is where you're at now. We need to uncover your needs. We need to make a strategy. We need to set expectations of what's realistic and get you financially prepared. Again, that starts 6 months, even a year out is when that starts. And so again, I can't emphasize that enough. Go ahead and book that. It's not a waste of my time. Trust me, if that's what you're thinking, it really does make a difference, especially for you, to get you the best results. Now, after we have the buyer consultation and we get maybe connected to a loan officer, which I have many good relationships with loan officers, you're going to go and start looking at home searches. I can't emphasize this enough. After you get pre-approved or know generally of what you want to be able to afford on a monthly down payment, on a monthly cost and a down payment cost and a price point cost, let me say that again. Once and only after you know what you want to spend on a total purchase price, monthly cost, and down payment cost, then and only then should we start looking at homes. And I'm actually saying this to help you, because you're going to get emotionally attached and tied into a home that you shouldn't even be looking at. And that's just going to create more, maybe animosity towards me and my team, or maybe just more disappointment in yourself. And so you don't want to do that. I've seen it happen many times. Please don't do it. Get pre-approved, know what you want to spend, and look within that range. Trust me, we will find you a good deal. Now, then you start your home search. You know, this is where you and I are going to be talking, or you and my team will be talking very regularly. Then we can, after we set up a home search, we're going to narrow down some homes together. We're going to look at some homes online. We're going to look at maybe 10 homes online, and we're going to filter down to the top 3 or 5. And then from there and only there, will we go and look at the 3 to 5 homes. Ideally, don't want to look at 5 in a day. Ideally, you want to look at 3 in a day, just because after that, you can't remember the details that you should be remembering. Ideally, again, 3 a day. But then we're going to view the properties. I will write the offer and prepare the offer and send it to you for signing. We're going to negotiate if we're doing pre-owned, or if we're with the builder, sometimes we can negotiate as well. We're going to go through inspections, making sure that the contract is being followed, review the inspection report. We're going to get you essentially tied up and tied into the mortgage company, the lender, and they're going to require a lot of documents, like confirming you make what you make, etc. This is actually the most stressful part of the entire process, is actually towards the end with the lender. Once we clear that, then you get to move in and we get to have a party, and you get to have amazing closing gifts from me. So that's pretty much everything. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for even giving your time and consideration to this course. And I hope you found a lot of value in it. I really hope that you did. And I really would like to hear your feedback. And this is important because it helps me get better. If you would like to see something that I didn't cover or anything like that, really just let me know. So thank you for your consideration. I look forward to working with you and earning your business and making a great experience for you buying your first home. All right, thanks.